Draft Utopia, Chris Ransom and Joseph Potter. And today we're going to break down the quarterback rankings. I know it's that time of year, and this is probably the first time since 2015 where Joey and I actually agree on QB1. I mean, we've had some fun debates over QB1 the last few years. Jared Goff versus Dak Prescott. We had Patrick Mahomes versus Kaiser, and it was originally Watson. We originally both agreed on Watson, but then we went different directions that year, and then it was Darnold versus Baker Mayfield. I think you were right on Baker, but let's focus on today's.
Let's put it this way. Let's put it this way, Chris. You have to really pay attention to me, and you know this because you have the guy I would take, and then you have the guy that I would put one simply because the NFL would take. I had Mayfield as my guy that I would take number one for 3 years. But I felt that Watson would have been the one at the beginning of last year that ended up number one with the team. So you really have to pay attention to that with me because I will run those two differences and I'm going to clarify.
Yeah, and Baker, if he had been draft eligible and declared for 2017, you probably would have had him in that conversation with the other quarterbacks as well. But we're going to look.
There would have been no conversation.
Okay. But, yeah, you had Baker. Baker was your guy. He was the best of the best. If we're looking at the QBs from the last three drafts, Baker was your guy, simply put. And the guy in this draft that we're both probably in agreement on as QB1 is Drew Lock. Now, he's still my top quarterback, but it is not as much of a lock as it seems. And here's what I mean. 6'4", 225, 1,283 passing yards, 11 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 3 rushing touchdowns, 14 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and a 62.7 completion percentage. He's a 3-year captain. He's been a captain since his sophomore year. And this class has one quarterback who can read up to 6 progressions on tape, but you're going to have to wait until the end of the show to find out who it is because they're QB 10 on these rankings. So, I mean, Drew Lock, we do have a Drew Lock film session on YouTube. This was from back in May when we got 2 games of his tape, and we sort of anticipated he'd be QB1, and he hasn't really done anything to ruin that status. I mean, he's got incredible throwing power and velocity, the arm strength to make deep throws, cannon for an arm, excellent size at 6'4", 225, short accuracy, medium accuracy, and deep accuracy. He possesses exceptional footwork, can make 1-step, 3-step, 5-step, 7-step throws. I didn't see a quarterback in last year's draft that had that much footwork down. And when you give this guy a clean pocket, he can fire a crisp spiral at the proper trajectory. His release can be unbelievable. He can play in any type of offense, and he's durable. He can play. He's got an excellent work ethic, 3-year captain, excellent communicator, and even when a receiver drops a pass, he will play with authority and get it together and move on to the next play. And with all these strengths, it's easy to see why Drew Lock is QB1. You look at the weaknesses, he can only read up to 3 progressions. And West Coast Scout, a.k.a. Caddy the Llama, he kept harping on Drew Lock's tape, saying he's not all that. And you know what? I sort of agree with him because I pointed out the progressions in the SWAT report that I did back in May, and that's what he was trying to say, that Lock still hasn't improved his progressions in terms of leaps, and that's really the big concern with him. But he led the SEC in passing yards. He also struggles outside of the pocket. And as far as opportunities go, I'd say the quarterback market is thinner than it's been in years past. I mean, all the teams like Denver, Cincinnati, Tampa Bay, Miami, that we thought were going to be awful, have done well at quarterback. I think one team that's 1 and 2 that could go quarterback round 1 is the New York Giants. And that's because the New York Giants, they cut Davis Webb, and they have Eli Manning and Kyle Lauletta. Kyle Lauletta might be a better decision maker than Drew Lock, but he will never have the deep ball accuracy or the arm strength, the natural innate arm strength that Drew Lock has. And for that reason, the Giants can say, you know what, Drew Lock's a better fit for us than Kyle Lauletta. He's a better candidate to groom as quarterback of the future. And Derek Dooley has helped Lock transition to a pro-style offense. I gave Lock a 90 out of 99 grade. And all the quarterbacks in the 2018 draft that went in round 1, I gave them a 93 grade or higher. This guy I gave a 90 grade to, and he's the only quarterback in this draft with a 90 grade or higher. So what are your thoughts on Drew Lock before I get to the next guy who's closing in on him?
Well, Drew Lock has all that. The thing with Lock that you really have to remember is that Lock, he's not spectacular. He will do nothing to wow you. That is something that a lot of people don't really understand as well, is that he will do zero to wow you. So that's something that you have to remember when talking about Drew Lock, is that he is an unspectacular quarterback, and he is not going to grab your attention.
Yeah, and Drew Lock still has some tough games. He's got tough.
The other thing you have to worry about is the competition level, because
that's only going to increase.
So far, not all of them. It's going to increase.
Yeah,
right
I mean, Georgia was the toughest opponent Locke played, and against Georgia, Locke, he did struggle on a few throws, but not struggle. He didn't struggle to the point where it killed his draft stock. And he's going to get tougher opponents. He gets a South Carolina team, he gets an Alabama team this year, and he gets Kentucky, who's unbeaten. Kentucky's 5-0. So Missouri, they play in the SEC East with Kentucky, so they could get Kentucky, South Carolina, and Alabama. And how Locke does in those games is going to ultimately dictate whether he remains QB1 or not.
It will, because the guy that's competing with him for that situation is hot on his heels.
And that guy is actually QB1 on Nick Kendall's draft board, as well as Dan Brugler's draft board, as well as Charlie Campbell's draft board. And the challenger, quarterback 2 in my board right now, but quarterback 1 on a lot of other boards, is Justin Herbert out of Oregon. And this guy is 6'6", 233, 1411 passing yards, 15 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He has amazing tape and amazing leadership qualities. He's stepped up to the plate without Royce Freeman or Tyrell Crosby. And his completion percentage is lower than last year so far through 5 starts. But you look at Justin Herbert, this is a guy that has good arm strength that he can come great. He may not have a cannon like Locke, but he can make special throws on tape. He's capable of displaying short, medium, and deep accuracy when given a clean pocket, and he can play in any type of offense, just like Locke, whether it's a balanced run first offense, a West Coast, a vertical, or a shotgun spread. He showed that last year. Great ball placement when throwing, and he got voted all Pac-12 quarterback, Pac-12 all-academic quarterback as a sophomore over Sam Darnold and Josh Rosen last season. And this is a guy who has that footwork just like Locke. And it's weird. Last year we were talking about how awesome the progressions were from Darnold, Rosen, and Baker Mayfield. This year it's more footwork than it is progressions. The quarterbacks in this draft have better footwork than the quarterbacks in last year's draft, but their ability to make progressions isn't as sharp as the quarterbacks from the 2018 class. But Justin Herbert, he does display inconsistent accuracy. While he can make every type of throw accurately, he struggles to throw accurate passes on a consistent basis as well. Even though he can make every type of throw, he struggles to throw accurate passes consistently. And this guy can make up to 4 progressions on tape. Some of the other quarterbacks in last year's draft could make up to 6 progressions. Mahomes, Goff, Carson Wentz, 6 progressions. Herbert's a 4-progression QB, but outside of the inconsistent accuracy, there's a few flaws with Herbert. He struggles to react well to blitzes. He also gets rid of the football too quickly. He needs to work on letting the play develop. He doesn't tap the football like Rosen did, but he also needs to be more patient, let the play develop. And if he can clean that up, he's a guy that could potentially supplant Drew Lock because he's already got more progressions on tape. And he had a very good game against California last night, really picked apart Cam Bynum on tape. And he's got some durability issues, but I gave him an 89 grade. I only have him 1 potential grade below Drew Lock. And if Drew Lock struggles down the stretch and Herbert keeps playing well, Herbert's going to emerge as quarterback 1. That's what I'm saying. He has an opportunity to. And he became the first Oregon freshman to start right away since 1983, too. So there's a lot to like with Justin Herbert.
Well, Herbert that I noticed most is one of the big problems I had with Sam Darnold this year. And that, simply put, is that he does not take care of the football. That is a huge issue. That's something we're seeing now in the NFL with Sam Darnold. What's Sam Darnold's biggest problem? His work ethic alone has taken care of most of the issues with his mechanics. But what's the issue? Well, he's just committing turnovers. He throws the ball. That's why the Jets don't let him throw downfield that much, because he will not only throw downfield, but he will literally throw the ball into double or triple coverage if you give him a chance. And that is problematic, to say the least. And so he will fumble. He did against the Browns. He threw two. They let him throw it downfield late in the game because they had to. And what do? Threw two interceptions. He fumbled, threw interceptions. So this is something you're going to have to watch out with Herbert as well, because he has the same issues. He'll throw into double coverage. He'll fumble the football in pretty important time periods. So, that is a big issue for me. And I think it would be a big issue for whatever team drafts him at some point.
Yeah, I feel like Drew Lock has bigger hands than Justin Herbert. If I had to guess, we don't have the combine measurements yet, but if I had to go off an educated guess, I would say Drew Lock has a bigger hand size than Justin Herbert, just based on how Herbert's managed the game at times. That doesn't necessarily mean he'll have the better career, but that's just an educated guess, if I had to say.
Yeah, it's like just one of the big knocks on Jared Goff, small hand. He's done pretty decently. So, I would take, unless there's an overwhelming talent discrepancy, I would take the quarterback with the bigger hand. But, there's not a huge talent discrepancy there, because that number one QB situation is wide open at the moment.
Yeah,
so,
and I think there's a third candidate that could.
And maybe there's not.
I think there is a third candidate, though, that can push for that number one quarterback spot. But the drop-off after these three quarterbacks is pretty significant. And there's a fourth guy that could be entering this conversation, but I don't really see him as that guy. But I think the third quarterback that could enter this conversation is Ohio State sophomore redshirt Dwayne Haskins. Now, to be fair, this is his first season as a full-time starter. But everyone's hyping him up, and given how bad the quarterback class is, given the fact that he has 18 passing touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and a 71.1 completion percentage in 5 starts, he handled himself well in Happy Valley last night. And he's extremely tough and durable. He possesses a gun for an arm. He can make any type of accurate throw. One scout told us his accuracy is better than Cam Newton, Marcus Mariota, and Jameis Winston, despite only having 5 career starts. And this guy can play in every type of offense. He has a very quick learning rate. His field vision's great. And there's a lot to like. He can make 5 progressions, but he can't make 6 progressions. But the fact that he can already make 5 progressions and he's only had 5 career starts is phenomenal. And I'd say he's the best in terms of the 3 quarterbacks that I think are going to be NFL starters. I think Locke's got the best chance to be a Pro Bowler, but it's still early in the process. But I think it's basically, I remember 2 years ago we talked about Mahomes, Watson, and Kaiser on the 2017 podcast, and then we said after those 3 there's a drop-off. I sort of feel the same way this year. There's Locke, there's Herbert, and there's Haskins, who has the ability to make progressions. He doesn't have very good footwork. He rarely moves his feet. He's not like a master of improvising with his feet like Locke or Herbert. And I want to see Haskins improve in this as the season grows. And Haskins has only started in 4 or 5 games. And he's having a very similar impact to Cardell Jones, who balled out as a sophomore redshirt. I even argue to a point that Haskins has had a greater impact than Cardell Jones. So I have an 88 potential grade on him. And he completed 70.2% of his passes, a backup to J.T. Barrett last season. So, I mean, I think these are the 3 starting quarterbacks. And there's one more guy that we're going to get to that could probably enter that conversation as a guy who jumps from round 3 to round 2 to potentially even round 1. But before we get to that guy, I want to get your thoughts on Dwayne Haskins out of Ohio State.
I have not seen an Ohio State game this year. But from what 3/4 of my Facebook feed says, he's a second coming of God. So we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and I'm going to I know some West Virginia fans are going to give me shit for putting Will Grier at number 4 in these rankings, but I just like Haskins more. Will Grier's 23 years old. The other quarterbacks, Herbert and Haskins, are 21 and 22 respectively. I feel like they have greater upside. And that's the thing with me. I feel like Grier plays in an air raid system, so while his production's through the roof, I don't think you can put too much stock into it at this point. I know he's dominating with 17 passing touchdowns, 3 interceptions, a 72.1 completion percentage, but I feel like the offense he's in enables him to make good decisions. He has amazing production. At the same time, I feel like he's a system quarterback that relies too much on short throws in an air raid offense. Like with Patrick Mahomes, yeah, he played an air raid offense, but he threw with variety. He threw medium passes, he threw deep passes, he threw short passes. Baker Mayfield threw with variety. I watched the Tennessee tape. I don't see Will Grier as the guy who throws with variety. I see him mainly doing these short check down throws in an air raid offense. And defenses are going to pick up on that at the NFL. NFL defenses will adapt to that, and they will pick up on that. And while he threw 429 yards versus Tennessee, his throws didn't stand out. And he made some mistakes despite avoiding turnovers, which I'll commend Grier for, avoiding turnovers. And he communicates well with teammates. He majored in multidisciplinary studies. And he's got a lot of poise and maturity. And that may be due to the fact that he's already a father, but he can throw any type of pass with accuracy, but he relies way more on his short throws than he should. And that's a really big pet peeve. He relies on his short ball accuracy. He can only make one progression and he'll take off and run. He'll throw to the first target he sees open. He gets frustrated under pressure. He'll get frustrated if he has to scramble it and go out of bounds. His footwork is awful despite the fact that he can take off and scramble. His footwork in the pocket needs a lot of work. It's very choppy. And he's mainly a pocket guy. I mean, this quarterback market's been thinner, like I've said, but Will Grier, I have an 84 grade on him, but if he goes to the 2019 Senior Bowl and he does well there, I'll probably move his potential grade up from backup to possible starter. It's like, I've got to see this guy play well against a good opponent, and he's got to win, and then I want to see what he does in Mobile. Like, Will Grier rubbed a lot of people the wrong way when he left Florida to go to West Virginia. And he's gotten a lot better since last year, but I still need to see growth. I still need to see him put everything together. And while he's making a lot of progress, enough to the point where some will put him in the first round of mock drafts, this is not going to be a draft where we see 4 QBs go in the first round. You're going to see 1, 2, or maybe 3. And this is a guy that could end up in the first round, but for me at this point, I don't think he'll end up in the first round. I need to see Will Grier do more, and I'd rather take Haskins or Herbert simply because I feel like they bring more upside to the table and they bring more at long term. So, but Grier does some things really well on tape, but I feel like he also relies on his short ball way more often than he should.
Grier, to me, is a guy who has immense talent, but I think he, like many college quarterbacks, are hamstrung by the fact that so many college quarterbacks end up with poor offenses. So I think that will end up being an issue.
I agree. That could end up being an issue. I feel like Greer will get overdrafted. He'll get picked before the third round. I have a third-round grade on Greer at the moment, but he'll get picked in the top 50. A team will reach for him, and I feel like it'll be a disaster if they rush him. Now, if they're patient with him, it could work out. But if they rush him, it's going to be a disaster.
Very well could be.
Yep. And that brings us to QB5. And after Will Greer, this is where the drop-off goes into full effect. And we'll start with Jared Stidham. This guy's 6'3", 214, and he has yet to have a wow game with 300 passing yards at Auburn this season. He got overhyped by casual fans, and rightfully so. And he could play in a shotgun spread offense, a balance run first offense, or a vertical offense. He doesn't play in a West Coast offense like you'd like him to, but he displays all the accuracy when he's given enough time. He was a talented quarterback, but he wasn't a guy who stood out. And with weaknesses, I'd say Stidham did better than I expected, but he needs to develop better footwork, ball placement, mechanics. His pre-snap and post-snap reads also need a lot of work. And last year, the only teams that he threw for 300 yards on were Mercer and Central Florida in the bowl game. And Stidham's decision-making in that bowl loss to Central Florida was absolutely horrendous. Opportunities, I'm not sure where Stidham goes. He's a guy who most have his first, second-round grade on. He hasn't shown me that he can throw 300 passing yards on a week-to-week basis. And this is a guy who transferred from Baylor to Auburn, but he's facing much tougher competition. And I don't really see a threat with him. He was a 5-star recruit in high school. I gave him an 80 for a potential grade. I had a 75 grade on him last year. But his decision to go back, I'm a bit more confident in him now. I don't think he's a starter, but I think he can be a very good second stringer if you're patient with him and you just let him develop and do his thing. Anything you want to add about Stidham before this drop-off just goes from good to okay to just horrendous? Because this is the drop-off's really beginning to take effect after Will Greer. And then after Stidham, it gets even more brutal. You got something you want to say about Stidham, or should I go through the next quarterback? I'm going to go through the next quarterback then, and then you can give your thoughts. Shea Patterson out of Michigan. This is a guy who entered the year as the top quarterback on many draft boards. There weren't any photos of Shea Patterson in Michigan, so I went into full anti-Shea Patterson mode, while other sites like Bleacher Report or Walter Football put Patterson atop their mock drafts. And I'm glad I didn't, because I had a feeling Patterson was going to whiff it and screw up like Connor Cook, and my gut feeling ended up being correct. He struggled on tape versus both Notre Dame and Northwestern yesterday. He doesn't do well in pressure games, and he's got good decision-making skills, but he's nothing special, and he's got a lot of issues with accuracy, footwork. He needs to return to school if he wants to be a first-round quarterback in 2020. He still has enough time to salvage his stock so he can be a day 2 pick in the second or third round, but he's not going to be a first rounder unless he goes back to school. And even then, he's going to get picked behind Jake Fromm, Tua Tagovailoa, the Alabama quarterback, Jacob Eason, who's taken over for Jake Browning at Washington next season. So, I mean, Shea Patterson's going to have an uphill battle, but what are your thoughts on Stidham, Joey, now that your audio is working again?
Stidham, I like him. I've liked him for a while. He's another unspectacular quarterback. But the difference is he reminds me of a guy. He reminds me of just this really just solid guy. It's like he's really nothing to write home about. I think he'll be probably a solid backup in the NFL.
That's sort of my assessment on him as well.
I like him, but his skill set is unspectacular.
It is, and the media overhyped this guy in the preseason, just like the next quarterback I mentioned, Shea Patterson, who had durability issues at Ole Miss before he transferred to Michigan. He's not standing out. But but I think Stidham's better than Patterson, just based off what I've seen.
Well, the difference between Patterson and Stidham is simple. Stidham is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Where Patterson, not so much. I mean, Patterson's backup did better than he did early in the year when Patterson went out injured. You remember?
Yeah.
I was like, why did they put back in Patterson? Well, they ended up losing the game when they had a chance to win it because they put back in Patterson. So, I mean.
Yeah, and there were mock drafts that had Shea Patterson as QB1. I know Tony Mario had him as QB1. Bleacher Report had him as QB1. Walter Football had him as QB1. There were a lot of mock drafts, and I said, this guy's transferring from Ole Miss to Michigan. This is going to be a disaster. And I ended up being right, and I stuck to my vision. So, good for me. Let's move on. I don't want to make Shea Patterson feel worse about his self-esteem than Jimmy Clausen, even though Walter would take great pleasure in that. But let's move on to quarterback 7, because I think there's an even bigger drop-off from quarterback 6 to quarterback 7. This is like a series of unfortunate events at this point. And quarterback 7 in my rankings is Jake Browning. Like, before we got to Jake Browning, here was our process. We had Tyree Jackson at quarterback as our original quarterback 7, but he sucked versus Army. And then Nick Fitzgerald out of Mississippi State only had 98 yards versus Florida. We were going to make him quarterback 7. So we had to change quarterback 7 3 different times. And we originally had Browning as quarterback 7 in our 2018 rankings before. So I was like, you know what? We'll put Browning as quarterback 7. And I feel like Browning, if he puts everything together, he can be the 7th quarterback drafted in 2019. But he could also go undrafted if he continues to suck. He's a day 3 pick at best. We both agree on Browning that he's not the guy we thought he was going to be. And he has potential to have a really good throwing power, but he never really tapped into that. And, I mean, Browning's one of these guys that really did disappoint the last year when Trey Adams got injured. So I would argue.
Well, Browning is the biggest disappointment of any quarterback in the last few years. I mean, he is a guy, he has all the weapons, all the chances, everything he needed to succeed, and he just failed miserably.
I mean, you could even argue that Browning doesn't belong on these rankings at number 7. And once I get through the top 10, I'm going to mention some quarterbacks that didn't make the cut, and I'm going to let Joey take shots at me and say, you should have put this quarterback in the top 10 because this, and this. So, because it's such a short list, and I think this class is such a weak class, I'm going to mention some honorable mentions and see where I went wrong in these rankings, because it's kind of brief and to the point. But Ryan Finley came in at number 8, and he led North Carolina State off to a 4-0 start. And because of Hurricane Florence, West Virginia and North Carolina State, that game got canceled, and both teams remain unbeaten. And it'd be awesome if they both remained unbeaten and played each other in the playoff. That would be pretty dope. I don't think it'll happen, but I'm not going to lie. That would be pretty dope if it did. Because it would just be a great story. Two teams that were supposed to play each other but didn't because of Hurricane Florence, and then they go unbeaten and make the playoff. That's a great story for college football. But Finley is a good arm, short, medium, deep ball accuracy. His decision-making's improved. He can only read up to 5 progressions. He's more along the lines of Mike Lennon without the giraffe neck than Phillip Rivers if we're comparing him to former North Carolina State quarterbacks. He doesn't have the dual threat ability Brissett possessed, but Finley's a pure pocket quarterback, which can be a good thing when you consider his intangibles. He's still one-dimensional, though, and that can be weakness with the right pass rush. The footwork is an issue for Finley. He's a 3-step quarterback. Opportunities. This is a guy who's impossible to predict his draft range. I love Ryan Finley as a day 3 pick, but the reason he's not going to be quarterback 1 is because Todd McShay jinxed him. Todd McShay had Ryan Finley as quarterback 1 heading into the preseason, kind of like when he had Mitch Leidner out of Minnesota as quarterback 1 heading into the preseason. And whenever Todd McShay crowns you quarterback 1, it's bad luck. So I'm blaming Todd McShay for the fall of Ryan Finley's draft stock, even though Finley does have some admirable traits on tape. 8 touchdowns, 1 interception, a 68.6 completion percentage so far. He's a safe quarterback like Greer, but he's got much less upside compared to someone like Greer. And it's Todd McShay's fault that his draft stock has not lived up to the hype.
Well, if Todd McShay's hyping him, then I have to question a few things.
Yeah. And the quarterback 9 is an FCS guy, Easton Stick. I mean, this guy has 10 touchdowns, 1 interception in 4 games. North Dakota State's 4-0. Easton Stick actually came in for Carson Wentz in 2015, went 8-0 as the team, and did so well that he got voted team captain as a sophomore, something Wentz didn't even achieve. But Easton Stick is a great arm that can develop into a cannon with the right coaching. He's durable, ideal NFL size. His field vision and decision-making is outstanding. So Easton Stick's a guy who really stands out. He can only read 5 progressions. His footwork isn't proficient as Carson Wentz's either, but opportunities, he may not have the best stats, but he's someone who could creep into day 2 territory with a strong Senior Bowl. And there were people in the summer in our Film and Friends groups who said Easton Stick could be a first-round quarterback because they were that torn on this class. And I think he can actually be a dark horse. I don't know if he'll actually go the distance and become a starter like Carson Wentz did. It's too early to say. But Easton Stick's a guy who is a safe quarterback. Like Ryan Finley, he's a safe quarterback. There's nothing special, but he's one of the safer quarterbacks in this class. You got anything, or should I get to the final quarterback?
Yeah.
All right.
Get to the final quarterback.
Brett Ripien out of Boise State, 6'2", 202, 1,389 passing yards, 12 touchdowns, no interceptions, 70.1 completion percentage. And I watched Ripien versus Troy, and he was the only quarterback in my rankings who had the ability to make all 6 progressions on tape. Unfortunately for Brett Ripien, he has a noodle for an arm. His arm strength and throwing power is so weak that he makes Kellen Moore look like Colt McCoy, and he makes Colt McCoy look like Jay Cutler. When your arm is so weak that you make Colt McCoy look like Jay Cutler, you're not going to make it in this league, no matter how good your stats are. So I have a 7th-round grade on Ripien, but he could get an invite to the Senior Bowl, and his uncle, his nephew, Mark Ripien, was the first 6th-round pick to win a Super Bowl. Tom Brady was not the first 6th-round pick to win a Super Bowl. So whenever some Patriots fan or kid on the street tells you Tom Brady was the first 6th-round pick to win a Super Bowl, no, that is not correct. Mark Ripien also got drafted in the 6th round, and he won a Super Bowl with the Redskins. And Brett Ripien is the nephew of Mark Ripien. So there's a chance that Ripien could actually go in the 6th round if he gets a Senior Bowl invite. But for me, I just feel like he's going to end up with a Shrine Game invite. Boise State's Brett Ripien I feel like he's going to get a Shrine Game invite rather than a Senior Bowl invite. If I had to say at this point, but again, it's too early to say. Would you like to talk about Mark Ripien and how Brett could be like his nephew? Or I know you haven't seen this quarterback, so if you don't want to comment on it.
I'm not even sure how that fits together. I'm not even sure how that fits together. How Brett could be his nephew. That's okay, well, but yeah, with Ripien, he doesn't. I don't think he's as good as a lot of other people would say he is, but I mean, he did a good job for what he is.
Yeah, he's accurate on throws, and he's the only quarterback in this draft that can make up to 6 progressions. That's why he is a shot. His arm sucks, but he can make up to 6 progressions, and he's the only quarterback in this draft that can do that, which is why he has a shot. Yeah, and there were quarterbacks that were juniors like Riley Neal that I took out of my rankings because they weren't really standing out. Like the quarterbacks that are junior redshirts that don't stand out on tape statistically, they're guys that are not going to make it or guys who are going to end up going back to school. So when we do these rankings and we hear people say, oh, it's a weak class,
I wouldn't say it's a weak class. I think it's got a lot of potential. And I think it has potential to be overall better than last year.
Yeah, but a lot of the guys haven't tapped into that potential. Like, they've had opportunities to get really good, and they haven't capitalized on those opportunities early. Now, if they turn things around late, maybe things will be different. But right now, it's looking like a no for me. Justice Hanson out of Arkansas State, I saw his tape versus Alabama. Khalil Tate out of Arizona is a guy I really had on my board, but he struggled early in the year. Struggled versus Houston, struggled versus a lot of these teams. So that was a no for me. Mark Fields, Kelly Bryant was on my rankings for my FanSpeak board, but I took him off because he transferred. Trace McSorley is a guy that you're going to argue got snubbed because Trace McSorley is probably the first quarterback on my FanSpeak board where you're saying, oh, you could have put Trace McSorley in your top 10 and it would have been not as awful, because it's like the top 5 quarterbacks you're in agreement with, and then after that it's like you can just basically pick none of the other guys outside of that top 5 really stand out, and they're awful, and you're cherry picking quarterbacks at this point. Like, there's still time for anyone in the 6 through 10 range to move up. There's still time for anyone who didn't make the top 10 to move up. I mean, after Jarrett Stidham, I think you'd agree with me that we're just cherry-picking quarterbacks based on who we like the best. Because you're going to argue that McSorley belongs in the top 10, and that's a legitimate case. That's a legitimate case. You got a legitimate case with that.
There's really nothing.
You'd say the same thing about Clayton Thorson in Northwestern.
Just what it is.
Yeah. Say the same thing about Clayton Thorson with Northwestern, too. I mean, there's a lot of – I thought he outplayed Shea Patterson yesterday in a big way. But he got benched for Trent Green's son in the opener. And a lot of people are, like, iffy about him because he didn't close the game. He started the game, but he didn't close the game. He didn't finish what he started. Gage Goodbrood's done well for Eastern Washington. He went to the same high school as Thomas Coburn from our podcast. Yeah, Thomas was a receiver for Gage Goodbrood. And Gage,
I'm sorry, Thomas.
Eastern Washington quarterback. Manny Wilkins out of Arizona State. He's a senior. He could be someone, but nobody's really surged up the boards. Lewerke was a guy that people thought could surge up boards. Kyle Shermer, Vanderbilt, David Blow, Purdue. These were all guys that could have been players who surged up the boards, but they didn't. And when I look through this list, the only quarterback you're going to make a case for is McSorley over Browning, and the rest of this you're fine with, pretty much. Like, because Browning's just that much of a disappointment in your eyes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, Chase McSorley is the guy I always liked. So I can't. I mean,
it's like if you were grading my report on these quarterbacks, you'd give me a B because it's solid, but. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can't say a guy I've always liked is gonna be behind a guy that does nothing but disappoint, even when he had a chance to shine for the last two and a half years. So I mean, it's difficult to put McSorley behind, the extremely short Washington quarterbacks who like to throw to the other team.
Yeah, and McSorley did well versus Pittsburgh, but he didn't do well versus Ohio State. But Ohio State's got a great defense, so you can't really fault McSorley for that too much.
McSorley is one of those guys that I think he'll be a very fine backup. He'll be able to come in and not screw things up. And he'll be able to make a few big plays when needed. I don't think you'll be, unless he turns into a Tony Romo type that comes out of nowhere, I don't think you'll be a franchise quarterback. I think you'll have a nice career.
Yeah, and I'm going to keep the baseball talk brief because the AL seedings have been decided, but the NL seedings have not been decided. And since the NL seedings have not been decided yet, I'm going to give Joey one of two routes. We can either pick the AL winners or we can talk about the NL tiebreakers. The NL tiebreakers, the Brewers and Cubs are tied for first place with 1 game to go. And then you got the Rockies and Dodgers tied for first place in the NL West with 1 game to go. And the crazy thing is if both teams win or if both teams lose, both teams are going to play for division tiebreakers. And that means Kerm's Atlanta Braves will be the only team with rest in the National League heading into the playoffs. Thanks to the tiebreakers. So that's just crazy how this could end. It's like we could see the Cubs and Dodgers playing in the wild card game if they lose.
Yeah, when I can talk about the NL because it just sounds like it's more of a
uncertainty, and the uncertainty is what makes it more appealing. I mean, we know the American League winner, whether it's the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Indians, or the Astros, will probably end up winning the World Series. But the uncertainty with the National League right now is what makes it the more fun conference to talk about. Because you've got the Braves who are locked in, you've got the Cubs and Brewers who both clinched playoff spots, but neither team's clinched the Central with 1 day to go before the playoffs started. And you've got the Rockies and Dodgers who both clinched with 1 day to go. So that's why